June 7, 1944. Normandy. Route Nationale 13, 4 kilometers west of Carentan. The roadside ditch smelled of torn earth and diesel. 16 men lay flat along its eastern bank, weapons pointed across broken hedgerow toward a sunken lane. Morning fog still clung to the field margins. No one spoke. Fingers rested outside trigger guards. The air was damp, cold in the lungs, and everything was utterly still. A convoy had been reported. American armor, possibly infantry, moving east from the beachhead. The blocking position had been occupied since first light. Panzerfaust tubes were angled toward the approach. 2 MG-42 machine guns covered overlapping fields of fire. The range was 70 meters. Visibility was acceptable. The order had been clear: stop anything attempting to move through. Now they waited. The road remained empty, but engine noise had been heard 15 minutes earlier, faint and grinding, somewhere beyond the curve in the lane. The men were remnants of a Fallschirmjäger company scattered during the airborne drops 2 nights prior. Their officer, a lieutenant whose name does not appear in surviving documentation, had gathered them at a crossroads south of St. Miraglise and assigned them to delay any movement inland. No radio contact, no reinforcement expected. The objective was disruption, not defense. The position itself was tactically sound. The sunken lane funneled traffic between high banks overgrown with blackthorn and elder. A vehicle could not leave the road without becoming immobilized. The hedge on the far side provided concealment for the gun crews. Escape routes led south through farm tracks into marshland. Ammunition was adequate. Morale was functional. The convoy, if it existed, had not yet appeared, but tracks in the mud confirmed recent passage. Wide tread patterns, likely M4 Sherman tanks or half-tracks. The direction indicated movement toward German-held territory. Standard doctrine required engagement at minimum range to maximize effectiveness of portable anti-tank weapons. The Panzerfaust was accurate to 60 meters. Closer was better. Weather conditions were neutral. Light rain earlier that morning had softened the ground but left visibility intact. No aircraft overhead. No artillery audible in the distance. The sector felt abandoned, though intelligence suggested American forces were already probing inland from Utah Beach. This road was a probable axis of advance. Logic indicated contact was imminent. Training for this scenario had been thorough. Anti-tank ambush doctrine emphasized surprise, concentration of fire, and immediate withdrawal. The lead vehicle was to be destroyed first, blocking the column. Follow-up fire would target personnel dismounting from following vehicles. Machine guns would suppress infantry while the Panzerfaust teams relocated. Total engagement time, 60 to 90 seconds, then disengagement under covering fire. The lieutenant had positioned himself at the center of the line with a clear view of the kill zone. His role was to initiate contact by firing a flare. Until that signal, no one was to move or shoot. Discipline among the group was adequate. Most were veterans of Crete or the Eastern Front. They understood the mechanics of ambush. They understood the cost of premature exposure. Standard procedure in this type of engagement allowed no margin for hesitation. American armor was vulnerable at close range to shape charge warheads, but only if crews could be prevented from returning effective fire. Surprise was the only advantage. Once lost, the position became untenable. Withdrawal under fire from multiple vehicle-mounted machine guns across open ground would result in significant casualties. Therefore, strike hard, strike first, extract immediately. The men knew this. The weapons were ready. Safeties were off. The Panzerfaust operators had sighted their launch tubes along the lane. The machine gunners had established traverse limits and confirmed interlocking fire lanes. Everything was prepared. The only variable was time. The convoy would arrive or it would not. If it arrived, the engagement would proceed exactly as trained. The engine noise grew louder. Then it stopped. Somewhere beyond the bend in the lane, metal scraped against metal. A hatch opened. Voices carried faintly through the fog, American English, low and unclear. Boot steps on gravel, someone coughing, then silence again. The The lieutenant did not fire the flare. His hand remained at his belt. His posture did not change. He did not look left or right. The machine gunners held their positions. The Panzerfaust operators kept their tubes steady. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. The voices continued intermittently. A radio crackled. Someone laughed briefly, then stopped. The sound of a map being unfolded, boots walking back toward the vehicles, another hatch closing. Engines did not restart. Still the flare was not fired. Seconds became a minute. The fog thinned slightly. Visibility improved. The forward edge of the American column remained invisible around the curve, but its presence was now certain. The range was ideal. Conditions had not changed. The tactical situation remained exactly as planned. The lieutenant's hand stayed at his belt. Time lost coherence. Men shifted weight carefully, trying not to disturb the undergrowth. Knees pressed into cold mud. Shoulders ached from holding still. Eyes began to water from staring without blinking at the same section of hedgerow. No one dared turn to look at the lieutenant. Discipline held, but uncertainty spread through the line like cold water seeping into boots. The Americans were stationary. Their engines were off. This meant either mechanical failure, deliberate halt, or caution. Infantry might dismount. Reconnaissance might push forward on foot. If they advanced beyond the curve, they would see the German position across 70 meters of open ground. At that point, engagement would become unavoidable, but it would occur on terms not of German choosing. Surprise would evaporate. Casualties would rise. Still, no flare. One of the machine gunners glanced back toward the lieutenant. His face showed nothing. He returned his gaze forward. The Panzerfaust operator nearest the lieutenant shifted his tube slightly, resighting on the curve. His breathing was audible now. Someone swallowed. Another man blinked sweat from his eyes despite the cool air. Minutes passed. The American voices faded. No movement followed. The column remained halted beyond visual range. No scouts appeared. No dismounted infantry emerged from the lane. The waiting continued without explanation, without signal, without resolution. Men began to feel the weight of their own weapons. Fingers grew stiff on metal. The cold worked its way deeper. Nothing happened. The lieutenant later stated, in a brief conversation overheard by two men during a withdrawal through the marshes, that he had counted 4 separate vehicle engines before they shut down. 4 vehicles suggested a reinforced platoon, possibly with additional infantry. Engagement would proceed as planned, but extraction under return fire from that many crew-served weapons reduced the likelihood of successful disengagement. He also noted that American doctrine typically included air support for forward columns. No aircraft had been heard, but weather was clearing. Engagement noise would draw attention. Fighter-bomber response time in this sector had been observed at under 10 minutes during the previous day's operations farther north. Additionally, the halt itself suggested caution on the American side. Cautious units sent scouts forward. Scouts would detect the ambush position before the main body entered the kill zone. The element of surprise, essential to the entire plan, was potentially already compromised. These considerations were not discussed with the group. No council was held. No vote taken. The lieutenant simply did not fire the flare. The order to engage was never given. The weapons remained aimed at empty space. The tactical logic that dictated violence also permitted its absence. Conditions had shifted in ways too subtle to measure but sufficient to alter calculation. Risk exceeded gain. Survival outweighed disruption. The decision was made in silence and communicated through inaction. The men understood without explanation. Doctrine was clear, but doctrine also assumed conditions that no longer precisely applied. The gap between theory and circumstance widened just enough to permit hesitation, and hesitation became choice. After 20 more minutes, the American engines restarted. The column moved but not forward. The sound receded west, back toward the coast. Either they had changed route, or reconnaissance had identified better paths, or orders had arrived redirecting them elsewhere. The reason did not matter. The threat dissolved. The lieutenant stood slowly. He gestured south with one hand. The men rose in sequence, keeping low, weapons still oriented toward the lane. They moved back through the hedgerow in pairs, covering each withdrawal in practiced rotation. No one spoke. Faces showed neither relief nor disappointment. Expressions remained neutral, functional, blank. They reached a farm track half a kilometer south and continued into marsh grasses tall enough to conceal movement. The ground softened underfoot. Water seeped into boots. Progress slowed but remained orderly. After another kilometer, they paused briefly to redistribute ammunition and check for injuries. There were none. The lieutenant did not explain his decision. No one asked. The group fragmented over the following hours as men rejoined other scattered units or sought fallback positions indicated in pre-invasion orders. By evening, the lieutenant was leading only 6 men. By the following morning, 3. Records do not indicate where he went afterward or whether he survived the campaign. The position by the sunken lane was abandoned. No evidence of occupation remained except boot prints in the mud and a few cigarette butts ground into the earth. American forces moved through the area 2 days later without incident. No after-action report was filed. The unit involved had already ceased to exist as a coherent formation by the time Division Headquarters attempted to reconsolidate forces south of Carentan. Casualty lists and engagement summaries for that date include no reference to contact along Route Nationale 13 west of the town. The American convoy's logs, archived decades later, record a scheduled halt for map verification and a route change based on updated intelligence about German positions farther east. Neither side documented the moment because, officially, nothing occurred. The absence of violence leaves no evidence. Bodies produce records. Empty ditches do not. The war moved on within hours, and the crossroads became irrelevant to both armies. Historians would later map troop movements through the sector without noting the brief convergence of forces that nearly, but did not, result in combat. The men involved dispersed. Some were killed in subsequent fighting. Others were captured during the retreat from Normandy in August. A few survived the war and returned home. None are known to have discussed the incident in detail. Post-war interviews with Fallskirmjäger veterans occasionally reference quiet days or positions we left without fighting, but specifics are absent. Memory degrades. Minor events blur. What did not happen becomes harder to recall than what did. The silence in the records mirrors the silence in the ditch. Both are structural. Both are complete. One man from the group. His name appears in a casualty list from July 15, 1944, was killed by artillery near Saint-Lô. Another was captured at Falaise and held in Britain until 1948. A third returned to Bavaria and worked in forestry until his death in 1972. His family later donated letters and photographs to a local archive. None mention Normandy except in passing. The lieutenant's fate is unknown. No death certificate, no prisoner record, no post-war address. He exists only in the brief window between June 6 and the collapse of the front in August. After that, silence. Possibly killed. Possibly lost in the chaos of retreat. Possibly among those who discarded uniforms and disappeared into the civilian population. Records from that period are incomplete. The Americans in the convoy, members of the 2nd Armored Division, according to movement logs, continued inland and participated in heavy fighting around Saint-Lô and later during the breakout at Avranches. Casualty rates in that unit were high. Many of those who sat in vehicles near the sunken lane on the morning of June 7 were dead within 6 weeks. Their war continued. The moment they did not experience, the ambush that did not occur, left no impression because they never knew it had been possible. 2 trajectories passed within 70 meters and diverged again without contact. Lives continued along separate paths. Years accumulated. The war ended. The hedgerows grew back. Route Nationale 13 still runs west of Carentan. The sunken lane remains, though it is now paved and widened. The hedgerows were removed during agricultural modernization in the 1960s. The ditch where 16 men lay with loaded weapons is gone, filled in and leveled. A small marker commemorates airborne operations in the region, but it references June 6, not June 7, and mentions no specific incidents. Tourists pass through in summer. The ground is quiet. Tractors work the fields. Traffic moves steadily along the highway. Nothing marks the place where violence was prepared, anticipated, and then withheld. The moment left no scar because nothing broke the surface. The guns were ready. The range was ideal. The order was not given. 70 meters of empty air between two groups of men, fingers on metal, breath held, fog thinning, and then boots moving away, engines fading, and the long, slow return to silence. The war continued elsewhere. The men dispersed. The record stayed blank. What did not happen required no explanation. It simply ended, and the field by afternoon was empty again.